Okay, now that we're all settled, I'm Oga Wanyiwu, Research Director for SAP Insider. Welcome to our Finance and SAP S4HANA Virtual Summit. Our session today is a panel discussion on the evolving business and IT processes in the era of SAP S4HANA and Cloud. Before we get started, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping items. After today's live session, recording will be available to you on demand for the next 30 days. I also want this session to be interactive, so if you have any questions, please place them in the live Q&A box located on the right-hand side of your screen. And let's get started. So for the panel today, I want to welcome Shoaib Javid from Worksoft and Stephen Smith from Thomson Reuters. And I want to give them a chance to introduce themselves and give you a little bit about their background before we get started on the panel. So Stephen, let's start with you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ogo. It's great to be here, and good afternoon, good morning to everyone. My name is Steve Smith. I work for Thomson Reuters. I head up our proposition team in the corporates part of our business, where we serve multinational and domestic corporations with solutions across tax, finance, legal, and compliance. I've worked in and around software as a service providers for past 20 years, predominantly in product-related roles, and coming live from southeast of England. Shoaib, over to you.
Thank you, Ogo and Stephen. Right, it's great to be here. I am Shoaib Javid, Chief Strategy and Product Officer for Worksoft. We provide solutions for process intelligence, RPA, test automation. I'm based out of Dallas, Texas. Look forward to this conversation.
Great, thank you for joining us. Look forward to your expertise. Why don't we start when we talk about kind of evolving business and IT processes. Shoaib, why don't you kick us off and kind of what are the trends you're seeing with evolving IT processes in this era? Yeah,
so I think there is actually acceleration of digital transformation projects that I'm seeing amongst our customers, and that's driven by three primary reasons, right? The first one is that a lot more of the business is being done through digital channels. So it's not just B2C commerce, but also B2B commerce, services like banks, even doctors, other professions, right? So a whole lot of business is being driven through digital channels, which actually is accelerating companies' strategy towards having digital processes to meet that demand. I think the second thing is the hybrid workforce, right? A lot of the employees are not coming to work and are unlikely to actually return to work even after the pandemic. So HR processes, finance processes have to deal with that hybrid workforce. And that's another driver. And then last but not least is this concept of resilient operations, right? People want to make sure that you don't have major disruptions because of foreseen events. And a lot of that is leading to migration to cloud or getting resilient infrastructure, including migrating, your core ERP systems to the cloud like SAP, right? So that's what I'm seeing with our customer base.
Yeah, and I think picking up on that, Shoaib, I mean, what we've certainly seen amongst our customer base over the past couple of years is a much broader globalization of business, both in terms of cross-border trade and where people are doing business, and to your point, the channels through which they're doing business, but also the variations in supply chain, which I think the pandemic has really brought to the fore, and the necessity to have a much, I think, more flexible approach and understand the different scenarios, which is really driving a much greater crossing of borders for companies into new jurisdictions, new territories, and where we see our customers kind of really trying to understand and evolve around that is particularly around the compliance side of things, really understanding the tax implications, the trade implications, and how then their systems support that increasing level of complexity of doing business. I think what we're also seeing in our customers from a process perspective, and technology being a significant driver of that, is the centralization of a lot of operations as they become more global. A lot of our customers are moving their, particularly around the finance area, are moving their processes more and more into centralized hubs whether we call them shared service centers, centers of excellence, etc. Some of the research we've been doing with shared service center network shows that companies expect probably 75% of those customers surveyed expect to move more and more functions into those centralized models, as well as increasing their technology spend 17% year on year to really support that. So I think it's that kind of globalization alongside the digitalization, which is really driving a lot of the change.
And that centralization, is that what speaks to the resilience, Schwab, that you were talking about, that companies are?
Yeah, in some ways, right? Because it becomes easier to manage, right? And I think people are much more focused on efficiencies and also sharing information across disparate systems as well as disparate functional silos, right? So I think those shared services, the shared services move really helps in that. Absolutely.
And how are we seeing, why don't we dive into SAP S4HANA, and how are we seeing SAP S4HANA and cloud adoption really support the strategies and processes that you guys are referring to in terms of the evolution of business and IT processes?
Yeah. So on the cloud side, right, I see almost every company that we work with, is looking towards a cloud strategy in terms of moving their core systems to the cloud, right? This has become a key initiative, even ahead of S4HANA in some cases, right, where they need to make sure that they have resilient infrastructure that gets them functional, right? And the main reason they're doing this is because it gives them flexibility of operations, right? And also helps them manage the infrastructure a lot better and also adopt newer, SaaS technologies as part of their overall operations. So S4HANA is a big component of that, right? S4HANA itself is embracing cloud as the primary go-to-market model. I mean, of course, you can have private cloud as well as public cloud, as well as, some on-prem infrastructure also in a hybrid environment to do this. So I think both cloud migration as well as move to S4 are tied together. Sometimes companies sequentialize them, so you go cloud first and then S4. Sometimes they take the move in the single step, right? So I'm going to do the S4 transformation, but I'm going to do it in the cloud.
Yeah, and I think what we see here is that there's this perpetual cycle to some degree of whether you go with best of breed when it comes to technology, or whether you go with a single integrated platform. And I think what S4HANA being the ERP and ultimately the hub of business, as that moves to cloud, I think that really starts to push us towards a best of breed model in a more effective way, because it not only opens up greater integration opportunities with third-party solutions around the ERP and the kind of broader end-to-end business cycle, but it also means that I think, kind of testing out those capabilities and bringing them into that life cycle is a much easier operation when you're doing it in cloud, much easier to get up and running. We see a lot more prevalence of, the notion of no code and inbuilt connectors and open APIs that really enable companies to kind of embrace the best of technologies, from the big multinationals to the smaller startups, and really kind of a bit more flexible and agile in their approach to how they adopt technology. I think the other reflection I would have on the impact that S4HANA and these big ERP transformations is happening is it's really drawing people's attention to the data challenge. I mean, ultimately, data is the absolute champion of everything more and more. And I think, as those big transformation projects kick off, it forces people to reflect on the infrastructure and the landscape they've got at the moment, and how they start to consolidate that to get that kind of golden single source of truth.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on that best of breed aspect, right? Because we see, heterogeneous systems much more now, because people use what best serves their need as opposed to trying to force fit functionality into a single solution, right? So we start to see the trifecta of, Salesforce, SAP, and Workday come to the fore in some of these discussions, right? So it's not just S4 that runs everything, but they choose other solutions that go along with it.
In terms of best of breed and what that speaks to kind of the challenge that organizations are having with serving customers better, supporting that virtual workforce, as well as dealing with the kind of compliance and compliance challenges that are emerging in this current environment. Can you speak to kind of the conversations you guys are having with customers in terms of those challenges that they're seeing and how they're addressing it?
Yeah, go ahead, Shob.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. So a lot of companies are now looking to streamline their overall processes, right, to deal with these challenges. And, you know, automation is becoming a key component to that. The difficulty with automation is, right, you can't just apply automation unless you understand your processes and you've already streamlined them to a certain extent, right? So a lot of times I see company making the mistake of applying automation in an ad hoc way, right? You don't want to automate bad processes, right? So in order to deal with these challenges, I think people need to take a holistic look at their end-to-end business processes, right? Whether it be record to report or procurement or supply chain or any of those, and rationalize the process first, understand it, identify where you have bottlenecks or problems, streamline them, and then apply automation. So I think a combination of process intelligence and automation can really help, but it needs to be looked at in an enterprise-wide way and not some ad hoc way of getting, you know, short-term benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, as we move towards the cloud, it gives, as I said, a lot more flexibility. And when we think about the data element of things and consolidating those, you know, there are a lot of ways we see now our customers kind of taking, I think, tactical steps towards addressing those problems and process and how they're doing the data gathering. I mean, you know, from speaking from a tax and finance perspective, you know, there's a multitude of surveys over the years that show, you know, the average tax or finance professional spends anywhere between 50 and 80% of their time manipulating data. And we certainly see a lot of our customers using tools such as Alteryx to kind of stem the gap in terms of how they consolidate data, how they get better assurance in terms of the quality of the data, bring data sets together, and then do analysis on it on the other side. I think also just reflecting on the, you know, the kind of the end-to-end process and the transformation around it. You know, there's a whole load of macro and business impacts on this as well. But I think, you know, what is often overlooked is the actual the people element of it. And I think, you know, people as individuals are more and more used to digital technology and modern technology in their personal lives. And I think, you know, the rollout and the adoption of best of breed technology inside your day-to-day business life is increasingly more important. You know, people are looking to have the best tools to enable them to do their job and, you know, get automate and kind of reduce the mundane tasks so that they themselves can actually give more value to the organization and kind of, you know, I think find more excitement in kind of what they contribute to the overall company.
Yeah, I agree a lot with that statement, because I think today, right, people spend a lot of their time just gathering the data that they need to do their work from, I don't know, all kinds of different sources, right? The new folks expect the data to be there, right? They expect to be able to have the information they need to make decisions. They don't want to spend, you know, most of their time trying to put it together. So actually being able to consolidate or centralize, or at least have something that federates the data across multiple systems, it's definitely a must-have, right? Not a nice-to-have thing anymore.
Yeah, and I certainly think, you know, as we see the shift towards S4HANA, we see a lot of companies that, you know, obviously see incremental gain to be had by consolidating their existing ERP footprint. You know, we work with customers with anything from 2 to, you know, kind of 60 ERPs. And not all of them from the same vendor. So I think, you know, kind of getting to a nirvana of one is a pipe dream, but, you know, there are a lot of ways as you go through, you know, the move to S4HANA that I think those multiple instances of SAP and, you know, R3 and ECC can be brought together, as well as I say, using those third-party tools around it to get to the end goal, albeit in a slightly more tactical manner.
We do, you know, when I think about the data that I surface across our members, there's a big focus on trying to reduce that manual processes and trying to reduce the complexity of their ERP landscape and trying to, you know, centralize the data so that they can focus on the more strategic aspects of their role in terms of delivering that insight. When we look at kind of business transformation and the opportunity to provide that for end users and employees, what type of metrics do you think are important to show that that your organization or that your integrator is delivering on that promise?
Yeah, I mean, I think well, when we see transformation programs, I think there is inevitably significant metric around the operational efficiency element of things. I think that we can't get away from the fact that that's often a driver in the good old-fashioned do more with less. And I think there are ways of measuring that through spend on technology, through reduced well, not so much reduced headcount, but really being able to demonstrate that the workforce are able to do their tasks in a more efficient way. Certainly we have our customers asking how they can extract analytics from or data from our solutions to see whether it be the VAT compliance process, whether it be the stat reporting process, how long each of those are taking over a period of time, how many errors are surfacing, how can they really understand where those kind of, albeit quite small, kind of bottlenecks in their process that they can then start to address. So, I think, again, it's really kind of getting line of sight to where the problems are and then looking at the solutions that you can deploy to solve those.
Yeah, I can follow on with that, right? So that the business outcomes and goals for digital transformation actually have changed quite a bit, where a lot of them become more strategic goals, right, as opposed to efficiency goals. So what we are seeing is 4 buckets of measurements, right? So there is the end user experience, like how do people that interact with our systems buy things from us, or times when they we provide them services, what is their experience, right? So how long does it take for us to deliver something, right? If you're a telecom company and someone's calling you to transfer over their phone line, what's that experience, right? So we're looking much more strategically at, what's your end user experience when you interact with us through our digital front door. So that's become a key thing for companies and surveys that we have seen from analysts as well as our own customers on improving that. The second part is, how do I innovate faster? Right, so it's much more important for me in a competitive landscape to be able to make changes at a speed at which I want to make changes from a business side, and then try to remove some of the constraints towards making those changes as quickly as I can. And then, of course, you have the cost efficiencies and the time efficiency metrics, right? So, am I actually reducing what we call unproductive activity, right? It's not about reducing headcount because you don't have enough headcount, right? It's no longer about, because I can't hire people fast enough, right? I don't have people. So the people that are there, how do I make sure that they're able to get through what they need to do? So this unproductive activity reduction or doing things faster are the other 2 measures that we see the metrics get distributed across.
Yeah, and I think it's an important point you mentioned there about the kind of measuring the KPIs. I think we more and more we see I think a more flexible approach to transformation programs in terms of chunking it up, and we all love to use the word agile, but I think being able to really demonstrate that as you start working through the different parts of the transformation program, that they are actually yielding the returns. And so important to have kind of milestones and stage gates in that process to reassure that that the intended changes are yielding the results. And I think also just generally from an internal perspective, as everyone I think feels the pressure to be effective with their spend around technology, around people and operations, is to really determine that it's yielding the benefit that it's got. I think the other good point that you mentioned, Sherb, was around end user experience. I mean, I think we're all familiar with, or a lot of us are familiar with net promoter score from a product perspective, and ensuring our customers are adopting and our customers are happy. I think we're also starting to see that in the transformation programs internally as well, where actually starting to measure net promoter score around staff, and that the impact of the changes, the systems being rolled out, that they're actually seeing the benefits through that as well as just a more business-led metric. So a kind of a people element.
And again,
as well as
to follow up, Stephen, on your point of measuring the metrics, right? we found that the two most important criteria for success was to have a well-defined set of goals and framework, right, of how you're going to measure success. You got to think through it, right? You got to spend some time to think through how you're going to measure success, what success looks like, and then being transparent, right? Being transparent in terms of the measurements continuously so that the good, the bad, the ugly all gets exposed up front so you can make adjustments, right? So you can't just hide things that are not working. You got to be transparent in all the metrics that come across from your digitization process, so you can make adjustments along the way and improve the program.
So one thing you said, Shoaib, was you talked about a holistic view. How important is it to have either individual or center of excellence that's in charge of that global process so that there is that holistic view with regards to either digital transformation or evolving some type of evolving an IT or business process?
I think it's critical to have a centralized view or a center of excellence or someone that's responsible for the key outcomes. However, right, that doesn't mean that those are the only people that are doing the transformation, right? You want a broad-based participation in that transformation. So it's not just a top-down directive, right? But you got to involve people and get buy-in into the program. And so there is a centralized model of measuring success, but it's also federated down to the people that are actually doing the work and soliciting input from everyone on how success is defined by them. So I think that bottoms up buy-in and the bottoms up participation is also very important in addition to having a centralized structure to drive us through.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly see, in some of the transformation programs we've been involved in, that, as you say, I mean, that top-down directive kind of sets the framework, it sets the precedent. But having those champions on, the teams that are actually impacted and are really using day to day the outputs of a transformation program, a change in process or a change in technology is equally as important. And I think, success is what will breed adoption. If you can demonstrate clearly that those changes are having success, then people start to buy into that. And I think being able to metricize that success as well and really put it in a way that people understand, then you start to get that momentum and get the support behind across all of the teams. I mean, certainly I think when you talked a little bit about centralization there, Ogo, a lot of the projects where we've been involved in centralizing operations globally, our customers have typically started with one region and have had resistance to change from other regions. And so it's not an easy path. But again, I think, you just have to have stepping stones and have those proof points that as to why this is a good thing for the business and the actual the people that are involved in those operations.
A little bit of patience, I think, is also required, right? So I see, examples of, so don't ignore the skeptics, right? There'll always be skepticism of new initiatives and change management. It's always useful to take some time to address the skeptics, because sometimes I find that the skeptics are your biggest proponents once they understand, how your transformation is going to help them, right? So I find that if you take time, it really helps out a lot of our customers when they've done this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what and just picking up on that as well, is that we see a lot of our customers really want to understand what their peers are doing and what those market benchmarks are. In terms of what excellence or good, better, best looks like. We tend to find where we bring together our customers into advisory boards or user days, that network is really what they take the most out of those groups, and really understanding what others have done and learning from them. And I think there's just so much more data and insights out there as well in terms of finding that. Those benchmarks for peers, whether it be related to your industry, to your business size, to your global footprint, etc. So I think there's often ways to measure externally against what you aspire for internally as well.
No, that's interesting. Stephen, I want to come back to you. You were talking about kind of the collaboration that needs to happen. It can't just be top down. Recent data that I've surfaced regarding our community, especially in tax, is that there's sometimes a challenge with that collaboration. It's getting better due to the recent kind of role of tax and compliance. But I wanted to just ask, what are you seeing there specifically with tax professionals regarding their ability to collaborate on digital transformation opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges historically for tax has been that they're kind of at the end of the queue, both from a budgeting perspective as part of a wider finance org, as well as, when you think about an ERP transformation, then tax is often kind of start to be thought about as you get through that program, as opposed to at the beginning.
Right.
Thankfully, I think the external environment is really driving a change to this in terms of how the tax authorities are approaching things. As we move more and more towards the real-time reporting of tax versus the retrospective returns approach, then that's really bringing tax into the spotlight in terms of thinking about it at the point of transaction, as opposed to a kind of post-event kind of reconciliation process. So I think that's helped kind of bring tax into the into the thought process as we go through process and technology transformation programs. I think the other thing is just generally the bigger spotlight in tax in the external and broader world, that it is becoming increasingly important to business planning. I mean, what we talked about earlier at the start about doing business and procuring from much broader range of jurisdictions than we probably ever have before, then that tax planning element, and in terms of how it contributes towards the business strategy and the kind of forward-looking landscape, is becoming increasingly important as well. So I think a kind of combination of things that are really bringing it to into the thought process earlier on.
And that complex landscape lends itself to customizations, right, in current systems and Shoaib, can you talk about kind of how high customizations in financial systems make it difficult for migrations and for data to move?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, right, people have done things to their systems that are unnatural through the years, right, and they have to live with the difficulties that face, and that's okay, right? That's okay, because I can take a broader view and say, look, if you just don't even look at the tax area and as one segment, but if you look at the record to report process or overall financial processes, right? People are looking for 3 or 4 different things, right? They're not just looking to, in some ways, they're looking to simplify the systems, right? So that, for example, S4HANA is trying to, consolidate, financial accounting and management accounting together in a single journal, for example, things like that. But more importantly, right, they want to start to get towards real-time closing, right? Real-time closes. So you don't have to do this month-end close and only have month-end close, right? So the reconciliation process, as Stephen was talking about, you want to simplify that so that you can have it at the source as opposed to some, big process at the end to reconcile everything together, right? The other thing I'm saying is, like, a lot of people are looking for better forecasting, ability, right? It's not just about looking backwards, but then how do I do financial forecasts more accurately? So simplifying your processes and actually using current technology to do this. So it isn't like customizations were forced upon people because the technology didn't do what they wanted, right? But now with simplifications and more processing power and in-memory analytics, you don't have to have these separate analytical systems, right? You're getting real-time analytics from your transactional system, which S4 helps you with, which again helps you simplify and streamline it, and then adopt more standard processes as you go along the way.
Yeah, and I think, and you can call me a pedant here, but I think it comes down to the kind of customization versus configuration. In the past, I think with a lot of them, particularly, on-premise solutions, a lot of money has been made through heavy customizations of ERPs and really tailoring them to the specifics of an individual organization. And then as time goes on and that organization evolves either through M&A or organic growth, that then kind of drives the need for further customization. I think, as we move to cloud and what we see with most technology providers now is really kind of building out the configuration environment so that customers can get the bespokeness they need for their business, but within a standardized environment, which means a much more simple maintenance path going forward and a lot more flexibility. I think what businesses have to ask themselves is where is it that we really need customization? It's that kind of 80-20 rule in terms of, is there a big enough reward on the outside of this over the next kind of 3 to 4 years to justify the increased maintenance costs and that deviation from a standard software package to really warrant going down that path. Yeah, I mean, I think, it kind of forces that consideration of, where should I be doing things within the realms of the software, and where should I be actually really doing something that's very tailored to my particular company and the way it's structured and the operations and the end goals.
And this can fall under a higher level discussion of how organizations prepare for a migration, right, Schwab? In terms of not only the customizations, but the data, the infrastructure, the landscape, change management. There's a lot that goes into preparing for that migration.
Yeah, I think you want to set yourself up for success, right, from the beginning, and therefore take a little longer to do that, as opposed to, a lot of people are now, getting forced into just doing technical migrations, right? So even with S4, right, people are doing brownfield or hybrid approaches much more than full greenfield, because full greenfield tends to be time consuming and expensive. But even if you're doing just technical migrations, it's good to get yourself prepared for success. So even if you don't do a full process transformation and completely re-implement all processes, it's good to clean up customizations, or it's good to think about how your organization will look like in the future, including the IT organization and adopting agile methodologies and things like that. So you can actually be prepared for better change management as you do transform. And one thing to do that I think is necessary, no matter what kind of transformation you're doing, is to baseline where you are, right? So if you do want to have improved benchmarks, or you do have to have improved outcomes, you need to know where you are. And in that respect, I think technology can help too, right? Process mining, other kinds of process mapping and process intelligence solutions can help you really understand where you are, what good then looks like. And then as you move forward, how do you continuously improve and measure yourself against the benchmarks that Stephen was talking about from companies that are best of class within your industry, right? So that's what I think would be a good way to start and prepare for your migration.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to migrations, the other thing is to be able to test quickly. I mean, I think I've never been through a migration before. In many cases of moving our customers from an old solution to a new solution, for example, where you're inevitably going to come across a number of hiccups, and that varies between customers and their environments as well. So I think it's that ability to be able to test quickly, understand where the gotchas are going to be, and then you can obviously adapt and pivot as you go forward. I think the other important thing with migrations, and we touched upon it a little bit earlier, is really being able to champion that change internally and make sure that you can demonstrate that you're making progress down that path, and that the pain that does sometimes come with it is ultimately worth it.
I like the test quickly part, right? Because we do automated testing at Worksoft. So again, the test quickly part here, right? If you have automation for your processes, you would be able to test them out really quickly, make sure they're working, plus also get some real quick metrics on performance and then user experience as you go along before you go too far down the line. Yeah.
Are you seeing organizations kind of more adopt that test quickly ethos, or yeah?
Yes, right. Yes and no, because I think a lot of times organizations underestimate the complexity of some of the migrations, right? So they're prepared for it in some ways, right? But I think the organizational challenges to getting there quicker and getting that change mentality sometimes is harder, right? I think. I don't know, Stephen, what your experience is, but I think people are much less, they don't pay enough attention to organizational issues that might pull them back, because they're much more focused on the infrastructure, the technology, and what the consultants are telling them they need to do.
Yeah, and I think where when we think about these kind of changes and migrations, this is where cloud technology really becomes a benefit. I think it enables a much easier implementation. It means there's less investment up front to get up and running. You can do it at a much easier kind of scaled process. So having that flexibility as opposed to the kind of old big bang of, you know, we're all in or we're all out kind of approach is really beneficial with cloud. I think it also comes back to, you know, when we think about migrations, that where customers or companies have you know, a best of breed model and therefore third-party solutions for specific functions that sit around the ERP. I think to some degree, you know, that change and that transformation is made easier because what remains consistent is those third-party applications around the edge, whereas it's, you know, it's the core that's changing underneath. And if done well, then ultimately the end users, the recipients, really hopefully won't notice a great deal of impact to their day-to-day functions or the customers on the other side to their experience interacting with the company as well.
Thank you. That's very insightful. You know, we're almost out of time, so you know, I want to give you guys a chance to kind of close with some final thoughts. You know, really, I think this has been a great experience for our audience, and I'm sure you know, they can visit your respective booths to get more information and connect with you guys over the course of this virtual summit. But why don't we close with some of your final thoughts on the subject matter? And start.
Sure,
yeah, we can start with you, alphabetical order.
Okay. I think my final thoughts are, right, like any other large initiatives, right? When you do digital transformation or you want to adopt automation or process mining or anything else, I think it's important to step back and define your overall business goals and outcomes and find a way to measure them transparently, right? And it's kind of very straightforward thing to say, right? And it seems very obvious, but I don't think people do it well, right? So a lot of times people do things for just pure technology reasons or just siloed reasons, but it's important that if you're going to invest money in any kind of major transformation, including migrating to the cloud or implementing S4HANA, it's important to know why you're doing it. And it's also important to know where you are before you start, because otherwise you won't be able to measure progress, right? So there's one thing that I'd like to kind of emphasize is take a step back, figure out where you are, and then figure out how you're going to measure success and how you're going to put together a framework for making it transparent to your organization and doing it on a continuous basis, right? Because it's not a one-step thing, right? Just because you just migrate over to S4, it's not that you're done, right? It's just the beginning of the process. You're going to have continuous transformation as you go along. So be prepared to deal with it in that way, right? So that's what I would say as my closing remarks.
Yeah, and I think just building on that, I mean, I would say reflect on two things really. One would be really challenging the status quo. I think it's easy with processes and you know, that have maybe been embedded into an organization or an operating model for a long time to just assume that, you know, you lift and shift. I think to Shob's point, you've really got to kind of reflect on what that end goal is and are there better ways to do that going forward. And in many cases, you know, technology moves so fast that there are, you know, so many enabling tools out there to achieve better outcomes. And I think the other thing is to really reflect on the people involved when it comes to significant change and your staff, your talent that are really the breathing heart of an organization, and you know, get them involved early, get their opinions, get them on board, think about what the impact is to you know, the end users, and how do you kind of communicate and I think translate what that transformation program is all about. Yes, there are always going to be big end kind of goals, but really how do you explain that path towards that and really break down what is a significant change into something that's more consumable.
Thank you for that. I want to thank the panel for the contributions, Shoaib Javed and Worksoft, Steve Smith and Thompson Reuters. I want to thank you for participating and providing your expertise. I want to thank the audience for their engagement and their support. Please go network with our community. Please go enjoy the virtual summit. Please go visit the booths of our sponsors. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergey.
Thank you.